Okay, so this is lesson 2, which is the second part of 7-6. I'm really hopeful that you did some practice yesterday, because otherwise this is just going to be me talking a lot. Oh wait, all of these videos are me talking a lot. But otherwise it'll just feel like nothing's connecting. So I really hope that you took the time yesterday to do some of these, and let's dive right in. So I am on question 12, because I already solved 9 through 11 with you yesterday. And this is just going to be me trying to find some common denominators in order to compare these fractions. So let's start with 4/5 and 75 hundredths, which seems really big, but here's what I can tell you. It's really clear that you already know that 5 will go into 100. So rather than trying to go down or anything like that, we are just going to try to make 100 as our common denominator. So you do need to do a little work real quick to figure out, how do I split 100 into 5 groups? But basically, if you do 5 times 20, you're going to equal 100. So 75 hundredths is going to get to stay the same, but I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom here times 20 to make an equivalent fraction over 100. So 5 times 20 was 100, and 4 times 20 is 80, which then helps me show that 4/5 is greater than 75 100ths. Okay? That would be this symbol over there. All right, so then 5/8 and 3/5. That's going to be another one to compare. And this is a problem that we already did as far as our denominators go. There's nothing that I find common between 8 and 5. Can't do anything times 5 to equal 8. And I can't think of anything that if I skip counted by 8s or 5s that I'll get to without other than just simply figuring out that I can make these both have a denominator of 40. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to rewrite these as 40ths, and I'm out of room, so I'm actually going to write it above them. So I need to ask myself, how did I get from 5 to 40? Well, that was by multiplying by this denominator right here, which was 8. So what's 5 times 8? That's 40. So then what's 3 times 8? That will be my number up here, which is a 24. Okay? And then I'm going to do the opposite on this side. So how did I get from 8 to 40? Well, I multiplied it by this number right here, which was a 5. So 8 times 5 was 40. So what's 5 times 5? That's 25. And that was a really close one, but 5/8 is definitely going to be bigger than 3/5. Okay? And then here, our last one on this page was 2/3 and 7/10. So I don't see anything common here. If I counted by 3s, I can't get to 10. So I'm just going to multiply these two. I'm going to make this as a common denominator of 30. So how do I get from 10 to 30? I'm going to times that by 3. So that's the same thing I'm going to do to the top. 7 times 3 is 21. All right, well, how did I get from 3 to 30? I times that by 10, which equaled 30. And so then that's the same thing I'm going to do up here to the top. 2 times 10 is 20. Oh gosh, these have all been really close. But you can see that 21 is greater than 20. So my arrow or my mouth will go that way. I told you to skip Puzzled Penguin. Hopefully you did that, because I'm not going to grade it with you. But then 16 through 27, I'm going to try to squeeze in as much of these as I can, but I'm also probably not going to solve all of them, so I can give you some, well, meaning I'm not going to go through all of them, so that way I can get to some of those word problems too. So let's look at this number 16. We've got 3/6 and 5/10. Again, I mean, my best advice to you guys is just to know that you've got those 3 different ways that you can look at it. First, can't do anything times 6 to equal 10, so I can't use my first method. My second method is that I could just simply multiply 6 times 10 to equal 60. But that third method is to try to find something smaller that will work. So I know that I can do 6 times 5 to equal 30. And because I know that, that's actually going to be the common denominator that I'm going to work with. So I'm going to make these over 30, right? So again, I could have done 60, but 30 will also work. How do I get from 6 to 30? I do times 5. So that's exactly what I'll do to the top. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, and how do I get from 10 to 30? I have to do times 3. So whatever I do to the bottom, I got to do to the top, and that's going to equal then that this is 15/30. So all together, that's just to show me that these were actually equal. Now, I'm going to show you something different with this one. This one is a little bit bananas and a little different. If you thought to possibly reduce these first, you actually could have seen that they're the same fraction. So 5 over 10 is just a half. If I had 5 of something out of 10, that means I have half of the things that I'm working with. And the same is true for 3/6. If I had 3 of something and there was 6 altogether, I'm going to again have half. So a half and a half are also equal. So that was a tricky one. We still found our common denominator, but we could have actually gone backwards to that one to get them to be over 2 as our denominator. But that's okay if you didn't do that part. No worries. Okay. Number 17 I'd like to do next, 10/12 and 7/8. So this is an example we did as far as denominator goes. I can multiply 8 times 12 to equal 96 as my denominator, but I think what actually would be easier is to see if there's something smaller that will work, and that smaller one that we come up with could be 24. So I could make these both have a denominator of 24. How did I get from 12 to 24? I times it by 2, so 10 times 2 is 20. And then how did I get from 8 to 24? I did times 3. So what's 7 times 3? That's 21. So then 21 is just going to be a smidge bigger than 20. All right. And then number 18, we've got 2/6 and 1/5. Just looking ahead, I don't think I can count by 6s or 5s and come up with anything other than 30, which is what happens when you multiply those two together. So I'm going to make 30 be our common denominator. How did I get from 6 to 30? I times it by 5. So what's 2 times 5? That's going to be 10. How do I get from 5 to 30? I times it by 6. So what's 1 times 6? That's 6. So then I can see that 10/30ths here is going to be larger than 6/30ths. So that will go like that. All right, let me do maybe one more row of those before I move on and just give you the other answers. So let's do 3/8 and 1/4. This is a good one because I can very simply see what my common denominator should be. I'm going to leave my eighths the same, but I'm going to change my fourths to be eighths. So how do I get from 4 to 8? I times it by 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. And then 3/8 is definitely larger than 2/8. Okay? This is another example of what we just did, 3/10 and 25/100ths. Well, I know that there are 10/10ths and a hundredth, or sorry, in hundreds. So I'm going to leave this fraction totally the same, but I'm going to change this to be something over 100. So how do I get from 10 to 100? I times by 10. So what's 3 times 10? That would be 30, and 30 is greater than 25. Okay, keep erasing because there's no room on this page. And I've got 6/12 and 2/3 here. All right, I might actually show you this in two different ways. First, I'm going to show you that 12ths and thirds. Well, what happens if you count by 3? Are you eventually going to get to 12? That answer is yes, so you don't even have to change this one. I can just simply change this guy to be 12ths. How do I get from 3 to 12? I times it by 4, so that's the same things I'm going to do to the top. 2 times 4 would be 8, and then I can see that 6/12 is less than 8/12, so my symbol would go like that. But I actually want to show you something different on this guy. 6/12 and 2/3 again. Just as an example, I always try to look for halves, and I know that 6/12 is the same as a half. So if I were to change this out and make it 1/2, I think it's pretty easy to see that 2/3 is going to be greater than 1/2. So I could have done that one in an even easier way. Now, like I said, I'm a little worried about time today, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer to the rest of these. Hopefully you did them. If there's one you got wrong, you could always jump onto Zoom, and I would be happy to go through it with you. But basically, let me open up my answer key. 22 goes to the left, open mouth to the left, I should say. 23 is open mouth to the right. 45, same, open mouth to the right. 25 is open mouth to the right. 26, again, open mouth to the right. And 27 is open mouth to the left. And with that, let's move on to some word problems. So we have Alexi and Kirsty here, and it says they're painting a fence around their garden. Alexi has painted 3/8 of the fence, and Kirsty has painted 5/12 of the fence, and we want to know who's painted more. So that's, again, just a comparison problem. So we've got 3/8 and 5/12. we've been working with 8ths and 12ths a lot, so hopefully that's pretty easy for you to see. Again, you could do 8 times 12, which would equal 96, but what's even easier is to change them both to 24ths. How do I get from 8 to 24? That's going to be times 3. So I'll do 3 times 3 is 9. And then how do I get from 12 to 24? That's times 2. So then 5 times 2 will give me 10. And then I can see that 5/12 was greater than 3/8. And so then that means that, which one had 5/12? Kirsty. So Kirsty has painted more of her fence. Okay. Then we've got Esther and Lavinia. They have the same math homework. Esther has finished 7/8 of her homework, and Lavinia has finished 3/5. Going just with my gut here, I already think that Esther has done more, but we shouldn't just go with our gut. We should also find a common denominator to really compare. So 5 and 8, unfortunately, doesn't have anything easier other than just multiplying the two together, which is 40. So I'm going to make 40ths be my new common denominator. How do I get from 5 to 40? That's going to be times 8. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 8, which is 24. And then over here, how did I get from 8 to 8 to 40? That's times 5. So then what's 7 times 5? That's 35. So yes, absolutely, Esther has been able to get more of her homework done. Okay. And then we've got Avram and Anton. They live on the same street. Avram's house is 3/4 of a mile from school, and Anton's house is 7/10 of a mile from school. So we want to know which one is the greater distance. So which one is the farther one away? So we're going to look obviously for the larger number there. So we've got 3/4 and 7/10. So we're working with 4s, 4ths, and 10ths, and those are the number we're trying to find a common denominator. We could do 4 times 10 to equal 40, but what I like to do, again, we talked about this one earlier, I see that 10ths could be 20ths, and I know that I can make a 4th be 20. So I'm going to make that my common denominator here. So how do I get from 10 to 20? I times it by 2, and 7 times 2 is 14. How do I get from 4 to 20? I times it by 5, and 3 times 5 is 15. So just barely squeaking by. Avram's house is just a tiny little farther bit away. All right. We've got just a few more and, one more word problem. We've got Leola, who's reading a book. On Friday, she read 25/100ths of her book. And then on Saturday, she read 3/8 of her book. Ooh, this one is hard, but I see what we're supposed to do here. This one's actually going to require you to make 2 different fractions here. So first, what they want you to recognize is money. We talk about this a lot, and what I mean by that is think of quarters when you think of 25 over 100, because there are 4 quarters in a dollar, which would make 100 cents, and 1 quarter is worth 25 cents. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this an equivalent fraction of 1/4. Now that this is 1/4, it's going to be really easy to compare to 3/8 because I know that I can change 4ths into 8ths very easily. So how do I get from 4 to 8? Times 2. So I'm going to do 1 times 2, and that's easy to see then that 3/8 is farther along of the book than 25/100ths. So we would say on Saturday she read more of her book. Okay? So I kind of like these last 3 problems that you have here. Let me make sure I'm not going over. Okay, good. Because they're just helping you realize you can't add fractions unless they have the same denominator. So here we've got tenths and hundredths every time, and all we need to do is change our tenths into hundredths. So how do we do that? We multiply them by 10 to make an equivalent fraction so that they have a common denominator, because that's the only way to add them. So 2 tenths instead is going to make 20/100ths. Very rude, Elliot. And so then 20/100ths plus 3/100ths would be 23/100ths. 17/100ths is going to get to stay the same, and 7/10ths would end up being 70/100ths, which would make this altogether 87/100ths. And then 9/10ths would change into 90/100ths. And if we were to add that to 33, that's going to give you, what, 123/100ths, which is the same as 1 and 23/100ths. Okay, I went through that kind of fast, and that's okay. So here's what I have to have you do today. I know this is a 2-part lesson. You're now totally done with all those SAB pages I would want you to do. So I would really like you to show practice in another way. Maybe go check out the homework and remembering pages, or maybe go check out whatever IXL lessons there were for 7-6. But no matter what, you need to find some common denominator practice here, okay? Log into Zoom if you need help. Otherwise, good luck.